Mark Carney faces pushback. Premiers disagree. Champagne steps in to manage fallout. The past week on Parliament Hill has tested Prime Minister Mark Carney's leadership like never before. What began as a strategic media blitz to shore up support has instead revealed deepening fractures inside the Liberal ranks, across provincial lines, and within the public discourse. The once confident narrative of progressive environmentalism meets fiscal prudence is faltering under sustained scrutiny from Conservative MPs, disillusioned provincial premiers, and a skeptical electorate. Conservative ethics critic Michael Barrett initiated the salvo, reminding Canadians that Carney personally endorsed the West Coast tanker ban during his campaign. Barrett highlighted that this ideological decision essentially shut down potential LNG development in British Columbia, undercutting domestic energy opportunities and paving the way for foreign competitors to fill the gap. The question posed to Carney was simple: did ideology come at the expense of Canadian jobs? That sharp disruption echoed beyond the chamber, amplified by premiers like Alberta's Danielle Smith and Saskatchewan's Scott Moe, both of whom have been clear that federal energy restrictions are harming their provincial economies. Carney's policy defense, that the tanker ban aligns with Canada's climate commitments, struggled to land amid stories of layoffs at LNG projects and stalled proposals across the prairies. The pushback was swift and pointed. Carney may be a well-liked global figure, a former Bank of Canada governor, but his domestic environmental stance lacks tangible benefit for Canadians facing economic hardship. Even loyal Liberal cabinet ministers are reportedly urging a pivot toward policies that yield immediate economic returns. Underlining this economic anxiety, Conservative MP Richard Bragdon framed the carbon tax increases, particularly the recent 23% hike on essentials like groceries, fuel, and home heating, as more than a policy tool. It was an impending burden. He branded the government as forming a carbon tax coalition with the NDP leader, pointing out that inflation on basic needs remains uncomfortably high, even as emissions climb. This narrative has struck a chord with middle-class families who feel sticker shock at the checkout and at the pump. Carney counters that carbon pricing rebates and climate measures are universally available across the country and currently softening the blow. But critics argue that rebate checks arrive slowly, while prices are immediate, leading many to wonder if the plan genuinely helps. Out of the debate, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has seized the moment, framing himself as the leader willing to axe the tax and offer relief. His message is resonating with Canadians who feel caught in the gap between long-term climate visions and short-term cost pressures. The economic narrative was further strengthened by MP Rick Perkins, who accused Carney's government of initiating a $3 billion tariff disaster. He explained that Canada's delay on infrastructure projects, pipelines, transmission lines, and critical trade routes has triggered retaliatory tariffs against Democratic allies. Perkins warned that these barriers aren't just diplomatic headaches. They translate into higher consumer costs and stalled economic opportunities. In the House, Finance Minister François Philippe Champagne moved to calm the turbulence, holding emergency meetings with provincial finance ministers and promising resolution. But sources suggest Champagne's behind-the-scenes efforts indicate the government recognizes the depth of the problem. This growing sense of urgency has catalyzed new intergovernmental tensions, as evidenced by Premier Danielle Smith publicly criticizing the lack of alignment between Ottawa's energy posture and economic reality. Saskatchewan's Scott Moe has similarly condemned federal overreach, claiming federal restrictions threaten not only provincial prosperity, but national unity. Even British Columbia's David Eby has urged more collaboration and less unilateral decision-making on energy and trade projects that affect his province's coastal and Indigenous communities. Amid escalating provincial backlash, Conservative critics turned the moral lens on one of the quieter controversies: Canada's continued importation of solar panels manufactured in China, allegedly linked to forced Uyghur labor. MP Bob Zimmer accused Carney's government of glaring hypocrisy, punishing Democratic allies with tariffs while remaining blind to human rights abuses tied to imported clean energy materials. Liberal replies invoked Canada's rules-based trade principles, but Zimmer's implication of inconsistencies stirred a powerful reaction across party lines and grassroots advocacy circles. Carney has responded by reinforcing a narrative of long-term thinking. In weekend interviews, he defended his government's approach as balancing short and long-term priorities, arguing Canada must stay the course on climate and economic resilience, even amid global uncertainty. But opposition and provincial voices are portraying that argument as disconnected. Macroeconomic framing may impress in international contexts, but not when ordinary Canadians face rising grocery bills, rent increases, and heating costs. The crises emerging this week are testing the cohesion of Carney's relatively new Liberal cabinet. With the 45th Parliament only weeks old, the government has already lost a non-binding budget motion and appears on the defensive. Internal whispers suggest some Liberals favor shifting the narrative to tangible affordability measures, tax relief, infrastructure acceleration, and clearer human rights enforcement. Behind the scenes, Champagne has become the government's de facto troubleshooter, shuffled rapidly from finance to trade and resource files in an effort to contain the political fallout. Such internal turbulence has not eluded Poilievre, who is capitalizing on the Liberals' missteps. With the Conservative vote share surging to levels not seen since 1988 and a resurgence in the prairies and working-class Ontario, Poilievre is keen to accelerate momentum. His message is consistent: build pipelines, eliminate the tax, defend human rights, and restore affordability. His campaign tour in Sudbury and Battle River continues to underscore that vision, and critics say the Liberals are focusing too much on climate optics at the expense of economic realities. For Carney, managing this widening crisis may prove more difficult than weathering the occasional storm in question period. His global credentials and calm demeanor are assets, but the domestic pressure is mounting from every side. One thing is clear: without policy shifts and expedited action, the Liberal narrative of long-term progress may give way to a more immediate alternative, a Conservative platform of economic rebuilding and fiscal relief. If this week marks a turning point, Carney's next steps will determine whether his government adapts or retreats. The path forward will need to reconcile climate ambition with economic pragmatism, provincial engagement with federal leadership, and ethical clarity with policy coherence. The public is watching, and their patience may be wearing thin.